The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as I gathered my things from the reception desk. Another 12-hour day at Henderson and Associates, where I'd become the invisible thread holding everything together. I arrived 30 minutes before anyone else and lingered 20 minutes after the last person left. I wore my smile like armor, but armor doesn't cover utility bills, and determination doesn't deposit into bank accounts. 6 months had passed since Marcus walked out, not in anger or drama, just a gradual fade, until one Tuesday he simply wasn't there anymore. The echo of his absence still bounced off the walls of our former home. I'd convinced myself I was resilient. But resilience doesn't negotiate with the gas company. Exhaustion had become my constant companion, following me from my frigid studio apartment to these sterile office walls each morning. This marketing agency became my sanctuary. 15 employees when fully staffed, though we rarely were. I thrived on structure, on being indispensable, even if that meant just coordinating birthday celebrations and maintaining filing systems. Mr. Davidson, the managing partner, remained an enigma. Early 40s, perpetually composed, the type who absorbed every detail while revealing nothing of himself. Our interactions stayed strictly professional, cordial exchanges about deadlines and meeting schedules, nothing more. That particular evening, I remained behind to reconcile expense reports. My checking account showed negative digits again, and tomorrow's rent deadline loomed like storm clouds. The weight of it all crashed down simultaneously. The tears came without warning, hot and frustrated and utterly defeated. I buried my face in my hands, praying the building would stay empty so I could crumble privately. Then came the sound of footsteps, soft leather against polished floors. Everything okay back here? I frantically wiped my cheeks, forcing brightness into my voice. Just exhausted. Long day, you know? Instead of the polite nod I expected, he approached my workstation, settling against its edge with casual familiarity that invited honesty rather than performance. Looks like you've been carrying quite a load lately, he observed gently. The statement hung between us, not accusatory, just acknowledgement. My defenses wavered. I don't want to burden anyone, I managed. I'll sort it out. His expression softened. I'm not trying to overstep, but if there's any way I could assist. Something in his tone felt genuine, unscripted. My pride wrestled with desperation. It's just housing costs, I blurted before censoring myself. I'll manage somehow. He paused, thoughtfully. Actually, I have an unusual proposition for you that caught my attention. My parents are celebrating their anniversary next month, 45 years together. I've been attempting to organize something meaningful, but event planning isn't exactly my strength. He hesitated. You have this incredible attention to detail, this way of making everything special. Would you consider helping me create something memorable for them? I'd compensate you separately for the extra work, of course. I blinked in surprise. This wasn't charity, it was opportunity, recognition of my abilities rather than my struggles. You really think I could handle something like that? I asked. His smile transformed his entire face. I can't think of anyone better suited for it. Walking home that night, my steps felt lighter despite nothing having changed materially. My account remained overdrawn, bills still demanded attention, but for the first time in months, I felt valued, seen, like maybe the universe wasn't quite finished with me yet. Something flickered inside my chest, not hope exactly, but its possibility. The project began the following Tuesday. He carved out evening hours for our collaboration, staying after regular business concluded. Initially, we focused purely on logistics, venue options, catering menus, guest accommodations. I brought organizational charts and colorful markers. He contributed spreadsheets and thoughtful silence. Despite our different approaches, a rhythm gradually emerged. He wasn't distant, just deliberate with his words. When he asked questions, he absorbed every answer completely. The first time I laughed during our planning session, he looked startled, as though he'd forgotten what joy sounded like. As days accumulated, our discussions expanded beyond party details. He shared stories about his parents, how they'd met in college, built their small business from nothing, weathered every storm as partners. I want to create an evening that honors their journey, he said one night, something that captures their heart. I grinned. So something beautifully chaotic and unforgettable. His laughter surprised us both. Precisely, the celebration became our shared mission. We debated appetizer selections, curated playlists from the 80s, designed memory displays. One evening, I discovered a bakery that could recreate their original wedding cake from a faded photograph. You think of absolutely everything, he said softly. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. The little things matter most. During one late session, as we compared flower arrangements, his hand accidentally brushed mine. Just a moment, barely contact, but electricity passed between us. We both noticed, then pretended we hadn't. But everything shifted after that touch. Our meetings became the highlight of my days, those quiet hours where I wasn't just an employee but a collaborator, a partner in creating something beautiful. One evening we ordered Chinese takeout and worked past midnight. Between bites of lo mein, he mentioned his previous relationship. She said I lived inside spreadsheets. He admitted ruefully that I'd forgotten how to connect with actual humans. I understand, I replied. My ex-husband spent so much time on his devices that he didn't notice when I stopped trying to get his attention. His eyes met mine. How did you find the strength to leave? I didn't have a choice. It was either lose myself completely or lose the marriage. I chose me, he nodded with deep understanding. That takes real courage, not courage, I corrected quietly. Just exhaustion with pretending. The silence that followed felt comfortable, honest. That night he walked me to my car. The autumn air carried hints of winter, our breath visible in small clouds. I find myself looking forward to these evenings, he said carefully. This collaboration, I wanted to tell him that these hours had awakened something in me I'd thought was dead, but the words tangled in my throat. Me too, I whispered instead. By the third week, we moved like dance partners. He'd suggest something I'd already researched. I'd propose an idea he'd already pursued. The synchronicity felt magical, effortless. He appeared in the break room one morning carrying 2 coffee cups. Figured you could use reinforcements, he said with a knowing look. That small gesture meant more than expensive flowers ever could. It proved I was visible, that my patterns and preferences mattered to someone. I caught myself studying him, sometimes the way he rolled his sleeves while concentrating, how his face lit up when puzzle pieces clicked together. Yes, he was attractive, but it went deeper than that. It was his quiet strength, his unconscious kindness, the way he no longer looked away when our eyes met. I wasn't naive or rushing toward anything, but something was growing between us, something tender and real and unlike anything I'd allowed myself to imagine in years. The anniversary celebration arrived on a crisp Saturday evening full of promise. Every detail we labored over now stood ready, string lights casting golden shadows, tables dressed in ivory and burgundy, photo timelines arranged like galleries of devotion. Guests began arriving at 7. His parents entered hand in hand, their faces radiating wonder at the transformed space. The music, the decorations, the slideshow presentation, everything told their story. I watched from the sidelines as his mother wept over the recreated wedding cake, as his father pulled her closer. He stood beside me, his hand finding the small of my back. You made this happen, he murmured. I shook my head. We made it happen. For the first time in weeks, financial worries evaporated. I was completely present, watching the celebration of enduring love that we'd built together. Later, seated at our table, I noticed his gaze repeatedly, finding mine across the room. There was something steady and profound in his expression, something unspoken but weighty. Other guests smiled at us knowingly, as if they recognized what we were still discovering ourselves. Then came the toast. He stood at the microphone, champagne flute trembling slightly in his grip, more nervous than I'd ever seen him. Tonight celebrates my parents, he began, voice gaining strength. but it's also about recognizing the people who lift us up when we don't even realize we're falling. His eyes locked on mine. This celebration exists because of someone who reminded me what it means to care deeply, to be present, to truly listen. Someone who showed me that love isn't just memory, it's action, choice, daily commitment. The room dissolved around us. There was only him, those words, and the way they wrapped around my heart like velvet. Overwhelmed, I slipped into the hallway for air. Moments later, he followed. Was that too much? He asked anxiously. No, I breathed. It was perfect. We stood inches apart, hearts pounding louder than the music inside. He reached toward me, not demanding but offering. I've been wondering what happens when this project ends, he said softly. And I realize I don't want it to end. I don't want us to end. I looked up at him, the question I'd been afraid to voice now unavoidable. Are you certain? He nodded, without hesitation. I've never been more sure of anything. You walked into my world when I wasn't looking for anyone. But somehow you became everything I didn't know I needed. The weight of his confession filled the space between us. My mind flickered with doubts. Was this just project euphoria, success afterglow? But my heart knew better. I felt safe with him, more myself, more alive. I feel the same way, I whispered. We returned to the party transformed, not touching, but connected by invisible threads. People were dancing now. His father winked at him conspiratorially. His mother embraced me like family. Then the music shifted to a slow ballad from the 80s. He extended his hand. Dance with me? I took it without hesitation. We swayed together wordlessly, his arms around me gentle but certain. I leaned into his warmth and let myself feel everything I'd been fighting for weeks. When the song ended, he didn't release me immediately. You feel like coming home, he whispered against my ear. That night, as we cleaned up leftover cake and folded linens, I watched his parents dancing alone in the corner, 45 years together and still holding each other like newlyweds. I understood then that love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through shared purposes and late-night conversations and gradual recognition. Sometimes when you're just trying to survive, life brings someone who reminds you how to truly live. The weeks that followed felt like awakening in a different existence, everything familiar but infused with new meaning. Monday mornings carried warmth instead of dread. His eyes sought mine not with polite acknowledgement but with intimate understanding. We didn't rush into labels or dramatic declarations. Instead, we let connection deepen naturally. Coffee runs became park walks. Project discussions became conversations about childhood dreams, past wounds, favorite memories. There was no pressure, no pretense, just two people rediscovering joy in each other's presence. One Friday evening, as we finished quarterly reports side by side, he leaned back and asked, "When did you last do something purely for yourself?" I considered the question. I honestly can't remember. I've been in survival mode so long. He smiled. Then let's change that. That weekend brought a spontaneous coastal retreat, no itinerary, no agenda, just peaceful mornings with coffee on the deck, ocean waves a soundtrack, and laughter that came easier with each passing hour. We talked about everything: fears, dreams, losses. He confessed his loneliness despite constant company. I admitted I'd stopped believing anyone could truly see me as worthy of love rather than rescue. On our final morning, walking the beach, at sunrise, he took my hand with purpose. "I don't want to be just a chapter in your story," he said earnestly. "I want to build something lasting with you." I squeezed his fingers, salt air catching my hair. "I never expected this. You weren't part of any plan," he chuckled. "You weren't in mine either. But maybe the best things can't be planned." Returning to the city, life resumed its familiar pace, but we were different, stronger, more grounded. Though bills and responsibilities remained, they felt manageable now because I had a partner, not to solve everything but to face it together. I made rent that month, not just from project income but from renewed confidence. I budgeted more effectively, requested and received my first raise, started building instead of merely surviving. What we shared wasn't flawless, there were miscommunications, insecure moments, but there was also patience, laughter, and daily choices to prioritize each other. His parents invited me to Sunday dinner a few weeks later. His mother hugged me with the same warmth from the party and whispered, "I knew that night when I saw you two together this was something extraordinary." She was right. Months passed, and what began as a desperate moment in an empty office had become the foundation of something beautiful. Love didn't rescue me, it reminded me who I was, what I deserved. It challenged me to open my heart and trust again. Every time I looked at him, whether across a conference table or from across my pillow, I felt not fairy tale magic but something better, reality, earned and true. They say love appears when you least expect it. I think that's only partially accurate. Sometimes it's already there, quiet and patient, waiting for you to stop looking past it and finally recognize it. And when you do, it transforms everything. There was a moment months later when I caught my reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back, not because she looked different, but because she felt different. Stronger, lighter, happier. This wasn't overnight transformation but quiet evolution, built from daily small decisions, tiny risks, and one unexpected connection that revolutionized my world. He and I had found our rhythm, imperfect but real. We maintained separate lives, jobs, obligations, but we showed up for each other in the ways that mattered most. He made space for me, and I learned to occupy it without apology. One evening after a long day, we sat together on my couch. No special plans, no occasion, just us. He reached for my hand as he always did and said, "You've transformed everything for me." I smiled. "You reminded me of everything I'd forgotten I could be." We didn't need fireworks or grand gestures. We had something better: consistency, kindness, and quiet passion that lived in how he remembered my tea preferences and how I knew when he needed silence instead of words. This wasn't about who saved whom. It was about two people who'd lived enough to know what they didn't want and finally found in each other what they did. Some evenings I still think about how it all began with bills scattered across my table and despair in my chest. I never expected help, let alone something as extraordinary as love. But looking back, I realized that rock bottom became the foundation for something greater. He didn't enter my life to rescue me, he came to remind me I could rescue myself, and that maybe I didn't have to do it alone. This wasn't just a love story with romantic flourishes. It was a story about trust, second chances, and how sometimes the most unexpected person can change your life, not with grand promises but with the simple act of truly seeing you. And in the end, that was the most surprising truth of all. Not that I fell in love with my colleague, but that for the first time in years, I fell in love with myself again.